Okay, well, I guess I'll record. Nope, Jacob's coming in. Okay, so last Friday we were starting into our DNS chapter and finishing that up and test out. We're supposed to be starting into chapter 10 this week, but as far as lab stuff, we're still looking at DNS. We installed a program called dnslint, and they named it dnslint just like literally dryer lint. You're supposed to clean the lint out of your screen of your dryer as you dry your clothes and run through laundry. So they named that program dnslint because it scanned the DNS server for stale entries and invalid entries. We ran it against our lab computer, and we got one little warning. It couldn't determine who was the start of authority because there's no reverse lookup zone. So we enabled a reverse lookup zone, and all of our warnings went away. At the end of class, we're going to run it against our campus and just see what we could get against our campus. But then we ran out of time, and the report crashed on me. So I'll rerun it today, a little bit before class started. It's taken about 10 minutes total to run, and it didn't crash this time, maybe because I run it as administrator and deleted the old report from last year. That probably had something to do with it. So I believe I'm sharing my screen and everybody can see this report. So the ASU system has an extensive amount of servers because we not only have BB and Heber Springs and Little Rock Air Force Base and Searcy. The ASU system also has all of Jonesboro and Mountain Home in Newport, and I believe Hendrix College that we've just bought out. And there's a college in Mexico that we run. So it's quite extensive. But this year was running against the entire forest, asusystem.org. I see our ASUB server 2, ASU bad, or ASUB Active Directory. And there's Heber Springs, Myra. And there's an ASU org that looks like it's probably at Jonesboro, ASU J Tree 5. So the first few look like the servers. These others down here, DNS servers, look like they are Jonesboro, ASU Searcy, Jonesboro. It doesn't look like we see anything in the other tree. Looks like we see the asusystem.org and then our asub.edu servers. But quite a few. I don't see any reds up there at the top. I found 27 global unique identifiers that are reported as, I guess, domain controllers and DNS servers. There's all the name servers. ASUB server 2 is what I did the dnslint against. If you see CNAME, those are aliases. So you see this big long name right here. It is also aliased as ASUB AD. And this big long weird name has an alias of ASUB server 2.asub.edu. So you could actually access either one of those registry keys and stuff inside of the computer. I normally use the big long number instead of computer name. I'm just scrolling through to see if I see any reds or yellows. Since you know ASU is such an awesome university and smart, they probably have their servers where they wouldn't have any yellows or reds. Except for this server, ASYS02. It's not responding to anything. See the big no right there? So everything's unknown. There's supposed to be a server here with that name, but this may be one of those lint things. This server may have been taken out several years ago, and we've run into some problems trying to upgrade systems here on campus and change out old systems, and then we could not add a new domain controller to the domain because an old domain controller no longer existed up in Heber Springs, I believe it was. And for some reason, the server that didn't exist was the one that the new one was wanting to replicate against. So it would not promote itself to domain controller. We were on a dnslint. I'm pretty sure we ran a dnslint and found some of the stale records. I thought Myro was the one, but I guess it was another one, and we had to go in and delete the entries out of DNS. And then we were able to do the domain upgrade or add a new domain controller. That one's answering, but it's not authoritative. It looks like it's a student one, which would make sense that it wouldn't be authoritative. This server is not responding. It's probably an old, obsolete one. So scrolling through the rest of these. Yeah, these servers I'm not sure exist anymore. The Heber Springs, that seems to be the one. I thought we deleted that. But that's our lint. We've got several servers here that were probably taken offline, and the DNS server needs to be gone through. And most likely, all of these servers right here need to be checked on to see why they're not answering. Are they behind some type of firewall, which could be a possibility, or maybe they've been demoted and taken off. So that's the main purpose of dnslint, is to check out what's going on with all of the red, especially.
Hello.
All right, so I'm going to close down the report. Anybody have any questions over why you should or should not run dnslint on your network? Because if you do have servers that are taken offline and they don't clear themselves out of DNS, you may end up with trouble upgrading, or your network may act weird. Some people may have hiccups when they try to log in, as they fail to contact a server that's listed in there but no longer exists. And as I said, when you have a 90–95% issues with Active Directory, probably stem from something like that happening, the DNS not being configured properly, or having stale and old records. Resume recording here. I'm going to look at my server. I'm going to look at the DNS entries. I'm sure test out probably covered all of this. But under DNS, we created a reverse lookup zone. We made ourselves a root because we don't have connection to the internet. And then the rest of the stuff in here was automatically put in there because we joined the computers to the domain, and they auto-registered themselves into the Active Directory DNS system. If you do have systems, maybe copy machines, printers, embedded devices, some Unix and Linux systems that won't auto-register themselves into DNS, you have to manually add one. And to do that, it's quite simple. You just right-click on the domain that you want to add the computer into. And you're either going to add an A or quad A record. I'm going to go ahead and click New Host and say I have a Linux 1 system. I'll tap the name, and then hopefully the server, printer, copy machine, whatever it was, would have a static address to it. And then set a pointer record. You could also allow that computer, if at any point in time it got upgraded, to be able to update its own record. You could hit the checkbox to allow any authenticated user to update the DNS record as long as the computer that they were on had the same name to it. So I'm going to click Add Host just as a manual setup. Now that computer does not exist, of course, but I can test out if I can ping it or not by opening up a shell prompt. And seeing that that will work. So if I ping Linux 01, it does resolve the 192.168.2.5. Of course, it won't ping because, of course, it doesn't exist. We're going to add a new host again. Actually, we disabled, I think, IPv6. Let's see if I can put an IPv6 in, though. I don't think it's going to allow me. It is. This version doesn't ask you if you're putting in a record or a quad A record. It automatically chooses the correct type. Notice when I put in an IPv6, I put up IPv6 address. Look how long that address is. That's a big long address. It makes it a quad A record. So IPv6, that's what quad A's are. A records is IP version 4, quad A's are IPv6. That's the only difference. And if that record is bad, you can easily delete stuff. There we go, deleted. Great, easy. I'm going to delete this Linux one. It doesn't exist. Delete, yes. One last thing in here. We got, well, a couple more things. We have a CNAME, which is simply an alias. So if you're creating an alias to a server, Maybe we want to call a server Bob. You don't put an address in. You have to browse and pick an existing system. So who do we want to be as Bob? I'll say server 3 is Bob. Hit OK. So Bob is actually going to point to server 3. When I hit OK, it comes up as an alias CNAME. So if you ever see a CNAME, that means that's not the actual computer's host name. It's actually pointing to server 3. So let's ping Bob. Ping Bob. What happened? I'll ping Bob, and it's pinging 192.168.2.3, or better known as server3.contoso.com. So I'll go ahead and delete that. Mail exchanger. A mail exchanger. This says the server that can send and receive email. Now, if you are trying to send an email, mwgoodman@asub.edu, DNS is actually taken into account in that situation. Let me say server 1. No, let's say server 3 is the email server again. So that's all you have to do is click browse, pick the email server. It should match your domain. Hit OK. So a mail exchanger. If somebody tries to send an email, say maybe mwgoodman@contoso.com, then the email client will contact the DNS server at contoso.com and ask, okay, which computer handles email? And your DNS server will respond back, server3.contoso.com handles all the emails. So if you're going to try to send to mwgoodman@contoso.com, the client will send the email to server 3. Did anybody ever have any thoughts of how email worked? Or even know how that it actually worked in the background? Well, that's how it works. It's all via DNS. So you're sending stuff to like jeremiah.williams@asub.edu. And then somebody's client asked the DNS server here on campus. It's like, hey, what's the address for jeremiah.williams@asub.edu? And our DNS server actually responds with, I believe we respond with, I think it's outlook.office.com or something like that. It's the Office 365 main server. So it lets the client know that asub.edu is not actually doing any work. We don't have a mail exchanger here. It actually redirects it to a completely different server, outlook.office.com, and then it handles. So when that outlook.office.com server picks up the email and it sees jeremiah.williams@asub.edu, it realizes, hey, we host a site for ASU BD, and we're going to take this message that says quit falling asleep and send it to Jeremiah's inbox. Sorry about picking on you, Jeremiah. You're just there on my screen. I decided to pick on you today. We'll have to pick on Matthew next. No, we picked on Matthew last week, I think. We'll have to pick on Jacob Lambert next week. So I guess it's your week, Jeremiah, be picked on. We'll pick on, have to remember to pick on Jacob.
Yeah, that's fine.
We've got to pick on somebody different every week, right?
That's fair.
Somebody already picked on Haley. They called her McDonald or something like that instead of O'Donnell. That's stuck in my head now. Y'all aren't in here. It keeps turning the light off on me. I'm hidden behind the monitors up here. The sensor can't see me. I don't move much anyway. Angry face by Haley. Who said that? We're gonna have to go beat them up as a class, Miss Haley. No violence, people. We're joking. Is Andrew? I don't know. Maybe violence. No, we can't do violence.
I'm here. I was in the process of getting a tablet connected to the
Uh-oh. Wow, are y'all still there?
I am.
Yeah.
It just bugged out for a minute.
Zoom crashed on my end.
That's no bueno.
So all of a sudden my screen went black.
We're gonna crash them back.
I don't know. I'm gonna check and see. I think it installed an update. I'm on the very latest version.
Well, that's not good.
Probably Sean's fault because he left and then he's coming back to break the system. It's probably him. He's what crashed my system. Wonder if somebody tried to Zoom crack into the system or not. I don't know what happened. Somebody in security class.
Sorry, I'm just testing out what all you've taught me so far.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't believe that, Andrew. Well, we might.
Did the screen share seems to have stopped for me?
My whole system crashed. Well, my whole Zoom crashed.
Oh dear.
Now I'm just kind of staring at things going, so did your internet come back?
No, it's not. I'm just running over Wi-Fi hotspot, so I'm not gonna be able to stay for too long because I've got to conserve as much data as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we just crashed and come back online. Now I'm like waiting for it to crash again.
Nothing's working today.
It's Monday. It's normal.
Just another manic Monday.
That's a Madonna song, isn't it?
Bengals, I believe.
Bengals. Okay. I wasn't sure. I'm horrible with names. Oh, am I sharing my screen again? looks like it. Somebody drew on my screen. Looks like Talon is reconnecting. Not a very good day.
No, it's not.
Video gonna be good or not. So just pointing out, so last week I do have all the videos from last week that we did on Wednesday and on Friday posted.
I was able to do those, luckily.
Security somehow got distracted and I didn't get the security ones in there until last night. So those of you in security class, which I think is every one of you, I did get the Friday's one posted finally under week 3. I remoted in and then I went and checked and I didn't see it posted. So then I remoted in and seen it was sitting there waiting to be uploaded. So uploaded it and got it posted. I was wanting to do that Friday, but I don't know, got distracted. Something happened. Squirrel ran across the road. I chased it. Got all about posting it. That's my excuse. Over on this week, what to the incredible crash. We learned about pinging Bob, and that's an alias. We learned about mail exchangers. My mail exchanger still in there? Yep. No. We have my mail exchanger back in there. New mail exchanger. Browse. We're going to pick server 3 is the mail exchanger. Okay, so that's in there. What I was wanting to show you inside of the shell prompt is a tool that's called nslookup. So nslookup is a great tool for testing out your DNS systems. I'm going to hit enter. nslookup. And I can type, oh, Ii. I'm going to mute you there, Sean. That'll also save your bandwidth. I'll type help, a bunch of help stuff out here. And maybe I want to figure out what is a server that runs email. So if I look right here, there's a dash, there's a type equals X. And X could be any of the following: A, quad A plus, quad A, any CNAME, MX, name of server, point of record, start of authority, service records. So if I want to figure out only what email servers exist, I can tell this command type equals MX. And now, set type equals MX, because I'm looking at set has to be in front of any of the options through there, right up there at the top. So set type equals MX, hit enter. Now if I type Tosa.com, the last part of somebody's email address, the stuff that's after the @ symbol, and this is what would happen if an email client tried to send an email to administrator@contosa.com. It would contact the DNS server and go, I want to see MX records for contosa.com. And what do I get back? I have server3.contosa.com. Well, that's pretty cool. You could do this at your home computer and not be remoting I'll bring up a PowerShell window to something that's actually got the internet and run nslookup. And then I type in set type equals mx. And then I want assub.edu, hitting enter.
Did you mean to just type NS lookup, or did you mean to type DNS lookup for that last command?
Yeah, it's just name server lookup. They don't have DNS as a command.
Oh.
Uh-oh, VB8002 timed out. That's not cool. They're having some issues. Maybe that's... Okay, so I've changed my server to one that actually is... I just had to type server into the DNS name of a server. So it's switching me over to 147.97.16.68 instead of the 10 dot whatever that it couldn't access. So I typed in ashb.edu. I've got it set my type equal to mx. And as you can see on the screen, the mail servers for ashb.edu is ashb-edu.mail.protection.outlook.com. There's the actual server running that, and there's two of them. There's one running at 104.47.73.10. Like, that does not appear to be an address on the ASUB campus. So maybe what I want to do is go to Aaron, aaron.net, Aaron who is lookup. And I can type an IP address up in the upper right corner here, 104.47.73.10. Hit enter. Let's see who owns that address. Microsoft Corporation. That's because Office 365 email is hosted and ran by Microsoft. What if I put in the DNS address, 147.97.16.68? And hit enter. I'll get who owns this? Arkansas State University. They registered it in 1991. Glad they registered it way back before the World Wide Web, and they got a huge chunk. They were forward thinking, going, hey, we're going to connect to everybody in the world possibly.
Isn't the World Wide Web www?
Yep. And that started in, well, I guess around 91, I suppose they started making the first like hyperlinks and stuff, I guess in 91. The engineer and some university made the very first website and linked some stuff together from one server to another server and said, hey, I created the internet. Here you go. Take off with it. My goodness, did it take off?
I wish I could have nailed them in the face.
So that's some of the stuff you can do with DNS. That could also lead over into security class too, where you could hunt and figure out things. You want to know what, like somebody's got a Yahoo account. Anybody have Yahoo Mail? Or do you have any friends that have Yahoo Mail? Look how many mail servers there are. That's a lot of mail servers.
I don't have any friends.
And then Gmail. Gmail's only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they have fewer, but they may be going, they probably head off to a load balancer that actually splits. Because they're not going to specific IP addresses. They're going to actual server names like alt2.gmail, blah, 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 which could actually be an alias for several different servers running. So it could actually be going into a load balancer that then splits those off into 50, 100 different servers on each one of those, which is probably the case. Busy as Gmail is, handling billions of emails a day, I'm sure those actually split off into lots of different individual blade systems somewhere in a data center. So just thought that would be kind of cool to look at, if you could use the nslookup for items. Which is how you get out of nslookup. Jump back over here to my server. And I'm going to go back into nslookup. Okay, back in nslookup, type help again. I want to set type equal to service records. And I'm just going to type Contosa.com, see if it gives me any type of service information. So it's going to say the primary server, primary name server, server 1. Let me see if I type in server1.contosa.com, and it's not going to give me much of anything else. So looking up service records, it's a little bit more complicated. To look up than just set type set type equals mx. It's a lot easier to look at. Query type equals x, same as type.
It's towards Alabama, Mississippi. It's like coming up to the coast.
Yeah.
And it's a tropical 1 storm, so.
August, September, great time for storms like that. Okay, so we come back. I did a set type equals SRV, and I'll come in here and to test out service records. One of the ways to test out service records is to do an underscore LDAP dot underscore TCP dot your domain name. So I'll type that right there. It's kind of hard to get typed in correctly because, like I said, it is an underscore LDAP dot underscore TCP dot contosa.com, and it printed out that there are 2 servers that are running the LDAP protocol on 2.1 and 2.2. I probably wouldn't really use nslookup to do a lot of tests like this to figure out what servers run what protocol. And also know that these are running on port 389. Some of you may have paid attention to that in security class on Friday. We were running some nmaps, and I pointed out port 389, let us know it was a domain controller in that class. I'm going to go ahead and quit out of nslookup, clear my screen. There's another command that's typically installed, especially if you have the remote server administration tools installed. And that is dcdiag, domain controller diagnostic command. So this is something you'd probably want to keep in a note somewhere that, hey, this here's a good troubleshooting tool. It can do a lot of the DNS testing and other testing. There's somewhere around 30 tests that it can run against an Active Directory domain controller to see if things are working. One of those, you can do a /? And do all kind of help stuff on it. So it's got lots of different switches that you can add to it. You can specify credentials to be passed to it. Of course, you could also just run it in the command prompt, and it'll run as whatever privileges that you're logged in as. So after reading all of those, clear the screen again. You could also look up some examples online on how to use dcdiag. But in general, dcdiag, you type the command, put /s, and then a colon, and you specify the server that you want to run it, the dcdiag on. I'm going to run it against server1.contosa.com. I can run a /c to do a comprehensive test. And then a /f colon here and specify a file name that I want to save it, or a complete path. So I want to save this in, might as well save it in C : /users administrator /file dot, I think it stores it as a text file, so I'm going to add .txt. One thing you got to be real careful with is that your path statement is all typed correct, otherwise it'll fail and won't be able to create the file. I'm going to hit enter and let the dcdiag tool run. So hopefully everybody either watching the video or at this time would practice with the dcdiag and maybe make some notes that, hey, this is one of the troubleshooting tools, along with dnslint and what they're capable of, because I'm not sure that dcdiag is covered in test out, and I'm pretty sure dnslint is not covered in test out. I'm going to go open up the file and see if we have any type of output Hopefully it did something. So I went under Users, Administrator. I'm going to open up that file. See if we get any type of information or if it's just a blank text document. So looking at this, it looks like that's a little bit more than just a blank text document. On my screen, I didn't want it to maximize like that. Microsoft, stop it. Just because I went to the bottom of the screen. There we go. Wanted to auto do. So you can see the dcdiag command. I've got it positioned at the very above the title bar of Notepad. So that's the command I ran. /s, specify the server, /c for comprehensive, /f, colon, and then specify the file path and file name to store the contents of it. It's a little bit easier to scroll up and down in a Notepad than have it on the screen. Plus you can print this out, sit around and have meetings about it, and solve the world problems. So one of the tests here, I'm doing initial required test. Can it connect to the server? It passed the connectivity test, so that's cool. So after it did that test, it did some primary test. And does it advertise site information? It did. Were there any security errors? No. So what you're looking is hoping that everything passes. And if everything passes, I have something here. I have a system log. An error event occurred. Event ID, blah, blah, time generated. The application specified permission did not grant local activation permissions for a COM server application with some type of CLID. So this test went and looked for the system log, and it found that there was an error message dated today in the system log that says, hey, you should look at that. That means in Server Manager, I'd bring up my event viewer. I would expand out my system log. Wait for it to load up. That looks kind of interesting on the screen right now. And I would need to look for about 8:08 today. And I see that we had this error that went on. Some type of application wasn't granted local administrative rights. And there's a unique ID for that application. And if I really thought that was causing some type of issue, I could Google search, but this is kind of a common problem that I've seen. That's never really caused much of an issue, but I could research that event ID 116 10016. I could research these identifiers here and see if it told me what the actual generic application name was for those, and maybe try to figure out what was going on. Could be an issue that I need a service pack installed to fix that issue. Moving on, looking, see if anything else failed. So notice DNS testing kind of like dnslint, all bundled into this one test here. Similar but different than dnslint anyway. We do have one warning. A root zone was configured on this. So you might be misconfigured. Are you really a root server? Yes, we're really a root server.
That was probably you that did that.
Yeah. Like, yes, I configured the root zone. So that's not a problem, but it's saying that there might be an issue with that because rarely are you a root server. Except in our case, we are. So that warning is legit. But I'm noticing everything else is passing. So dcdiag is really great if something does fail. And sometimes you might want to ignore the system log stuff, but you're looking at everything else. If everything else is passing, then your system's pretty good. But if something fails, like net logins is failing, you definitely want to go figure out why that was failing. Look up any type of errors that it's displaying here on dcdiag and fix that issue. So we have a completely working system, and dcdiag says, hey, everything's working great, which is expected, but something's not working great. It can be an invaluable tool in trying to start your troubleshooting process, because it will tell you like what pieces of Active Directory is not communicating or not working correctly. I want you to know what component might be possibly causing the problem. Of course, always check DNS first, but it gives you a starting point. So yeah, definitely keep dcdiag because I doubt that they cover that in test out. And you might write down common switches to it to test for everything. And a common switch for dcdiag is /s followed by server name /c comprehensive test, and then follow the /f and then a path and file name with .txt. So great command to note down. When you get a job and you have to diagnose Active Directory, I don't know if you'll remember this exists or not, but it's one of those, I don't know, things you have like a journal somewhere and go, this is what Goodman said to help troubleshoot Active Directory, dcdiag, dnslint, nslookup, things like that. One of the other really important commands, if you make changes to your DNS, say I go and remove something, most especially if something is deleted or if you've changed an IP address on something, then that can cause issues until a 21-hour to 24-hour time frame has elapsed, or you go to your machine and you clear your DNS cache. So ipconfig has a couple of switches here that you need to know. One of them would be ipconfig /display DNS. That will display all of the stuff that your computer has cached. So if you're having trouble logging in or accessing some system and you're not sure why, you can do an ipconfig /display DNS, and you can try to find the system. Maybe like you're looking at the Linux 01 and you're having trouble accessing it, maybe you look at it and you figure out it doesn't have the right IP address listed here. Maybe you go, oh, I just went and modified the DNS server and changed the IP address to say .4 instead of .5. So if you did the display DNS and you see an entry that doesn't match up with what the server really is, and you realize that you've made that change, what you can do in that case is do an ipconfig /flush DNS. I typically don't display. I typically just go ahead and do an ipconfig /flush DNS and don't even look at what's going on. Because now my DNS is blanked out. So my normal go-to, instead of even just looking at anything, I just do an ipconfig /flush DNS. Now, if I try to ping Linux 01 or something like that, it's going to say it doesn't exist anymore, which it does, and I deleted it. So that's a good thing. It didn't need to be cached. So flushing that lets me know that no longer exists, and the DNS server does not respond with it. So flushing is a very, very common thing, semi-common thing, especially if you make any type of additions or changes to your domain. ipconfig /flush DNS. Another switch that is really common with ipconfig, so this should be something in your journal, is the register DNS. The ipconfig /register DNS forces the computer to re-register any changes. Maybe your computer is statically assigned an IP address, or maybe you changed the computer name, something like that. If you do an ipconfig /register DNS, it will tell the DNS servers, hey, I've got an update. Excuse me, hey, I've got an update. We need to change my computer name, or hey, you need to change the IP address because I've got a new one. And that'll make sure the DNS servers have the most up-to-date information. So definitely try that. If that's normally automatically run, well, if you go into the TCP/IP version 4 and make a change and click OK, that typically is run automatically for you. And that is done right here by this checkbox, register this computer's address in DNS. So if you do make any changes to any of the settings, that checkbox, unless somebody's unchecked it, will go ahead and tell the DNS servers to update their configuration information. So if I change an address, click OK, it's supposed to do that automatically. If it doesn't do that automatically, ipconfig /register DNS is very common. So the stuff that you should have in a notepad or in a written down journal for later use. So ipconfig /flush DNS. Now clear DNS cache, very useful when you make changes to DNS. So ipconfig register DNS, that forces the computer to tell the DNS server to update its info or to re-register its name and IP address with the DNS servers. Other things useful. ipconfig release. Drops the DHCP address, and we will have a chapter on DHCP server later on. I think it's chapter 13. And ipconfig/renew, get a new IP address or release it. That's probably worded better. Get a new IP address or extend release time. Like I said, we'll cover we'll cover those two switches at a later date. But as far as what we've been covering with our DNS chapter, the ipconfig/flush DNS and ipconfig/register DNS would go with the chapter 9 that we've covered, and these here would go with chapter 13 when we get into DHCP server. And you should have also had the dcdiag /s : probably write it like server name goes here /c and then /f : path and file name. So dnslint, that is mostly just checks for bad records. Checks for bad records. So that should probably be in your journal on troubleshooting commands, and that you can, some of the troubleshooting commands you can use for Active Directory. Without knowing those, you can just be staring at the thing going, I don't know what to do. It's not working right. So any questions over that? Anybody still playing with nslookup? Or did everybody go to sleep? All right, Brian's making a journal. That's good. So another little hint, you can always use Google to search for things like how to use dcdiag. And that's where they give right here to one of the quick overviews if you forgot the /s switch, or maybe you just remember dcdiag was a thing That's half the battle. If you know dcdiag was a thing, but you didn't remember anything else, you always use how to use dcdiag or what is dcdiag, and so there's where the /s switch came from, followed by the server name. I don't think the colon should have been there on /c. /c means comprehensive. It'll run all the tests, including a DNS test. And there's where I got the /f. Would redirect the results from the PowerShell window to a text file. I always like to throw reports into a text file. It's easier to copy and paste things out of a text file and troubleshoot and search than it is if it's just displayed onto the screen. And then it shows you lots of examples, but I don't know if they use, I don't think they use what I put out there, but yeah, there it is. And that says his favorite. I didn't even look down that long. So he used the S, the C. We didn't use the V switch. So he used an extra switch there, but we got kind of close to what he used for an example. But never hesitate. That's what IT is. Googling it. You just got to know what to Google. And that's why you're putting these notes down. dcdiag and the ipconfig and dnslint. Because when you get on the job, you're not going to remember this day. I mean, some of you might, but I don't think you'll remember all the switches and stuff, 6 months, a year from now, if you have to do some troubleshooting. But just knowing that the commands exist, that is the key part, and that you've used them hopefully once that you went in and actually typed these out. That's the thing, is if you didn't go into PowerShell or open up your PowerShell on your computer, especially with dcdiag and going onto a server and running dcdiag, if you didn't actually do that and see the output, you might forget that the command even exists when you get out in the workforce. If you're looking at this video later on and repracticing those, the main thing is maybe not necessarily memorizing the command and exactly how it works, but that it exists and that it's used there for troubleshooting, so you can remember to look back in your notes or be able to Google it in the future. I believe I've covered about everything that I can think to cover, or that we should cover on DNS. It's fairly simple. You've got a name, you've got an IP address, and then it tells the client machines that information when requested. So it's fairly simple, but if anything is screwed up, especially in the service records here, then you've got problems. So if there's not any questions, I think we've covered everything for this chapter 9. And that'll lead you into needing to start into chapter 10. So I think we can call it a day.